Hey everybody, Jake here from Bearded Gear, and today I have a bit of a different video. This is something I haven't done before. I've done some videos in the past of like top knives for a certain task or some of my favorite secondary knives. I think I've done favorite primary knives. I mean to keep doing a favorite kind of outdoor folders. I've done some kind of top lists before, but in front of the camera, it's actually not all in frame. There's more up this way. I have all of my current folding knives other than like some junk drawer knives that definitely have no chance of making the cut. But I'm in an intriguing group chat on Instagram, and one of my buddies in there, I'll link him down below. His Instagram handle is mbwild. He was talking recently about a method of picking your favorite items, whether it be a top 10 or a top 3 or whatever it may be, and he explained it as being used in a variety of fields by experts to be able to actually narrow things down in a more tangible way than simply listing them in your mind or on paper. And so I've been meaning to kind of declare for myself, partially out of curiosity and partially out of having difficulty at this point deciding what things I'm going to sell so that I can keep fueling this hobby. That's just the way that I operate. So I thought it would be fun to create a top 10 of my knives in my current collection. Now, the way that this is going to go is not going to be my 10 most useful. It's not going to be my 10 best in pocket. It's not going to be my 10 best ergonomically. It is going to be as completely subjective as is possible. It's just going to be my 10 favorite. And the way that I'm going to do this, I'll make it kind of an open tag for any of my friends' channels who want to try this out and do a similar thing. But the importance of this process is going to be, I'm not going to just look them over and arbitrarily decide. I'm going to pick them up one by one, and I'm going to rank them into a top 10. I'm not sure yet whether I'll rank them from 10 to 1 in that top 10 or how I'm going to end up laying them out. But by the end of this video, I hope to have a top 10 laid out kind of right here in this row. This is just kind of the order they came out of my cases in, so there's no real rhyme or reason currently to the way they're set on the table, but one by one I will pick each of them up and I will decide whether to take it off of the table or keep it on the table to keep deliberating, and I'm just going to thin it out. This may become a very long video. I'm going to honor the process, and if you get bored, by all means, skip it. I'm not making you watch it, but I figured it would be fun to record it, both for myself and for those curious to watch. So the importance of picking each one up from what my buddy described is that it actually engages the entire brain. It gives you a different sensation of the knife than you would have by just writing them down in a list and ranking them in your top 10. Oftentimes the results will be different if you add that tangible element to them. So there are certainly some in here that I'm already confident are going to be in the top 10, but there's a whole bunch in that list that I'm not sure which ones will get the spot. So let's figure it out together. First things first, I'm going to start kind of up here where you can't see and bring knives into frame. All of these are knives that I own, and therefore they are knives that I like. There's nothing on this table that I don't like. Sincerely, these are all good knives, and there's a reason why I own each and every one of them. Some of them are sentimental knives that the reason why I still have them is because they were gifts or have stories behind them, so those probably won't make it in the top 10, but there's still reasons why I own them. But the knives here at the top are, I've got this whole row of my Finch knives, and my favorite Finch knife is this one. This is the 1929. I say that it's my favorite because I have specifically held it side by side with the Runtley and the Tycoona, which are their current offerings, although there are more on the way. But this is the one that I think honestly has a shot at making it into top 10. So I'm not for sure declaring that it is in the top 10 yet, but I'm going to set it where I can kind of deliberate. The Runtley I love as well. I actually have two Runtleys. I have the yellow belly, and I've got this one, which I think they call it pumpkin green. And these are both just excellent, excellent little secondary knives. I carry them and use them with pretty regular frequency, and I quite enjoy these knives. But if I'm being honest, compared to everything else before me on the table, I just don't see these making it into my top 10 favorite knives, period. That's a daunting list to get into. So much with like a lot of these things are going to get knocked out of the running. Again, it does not mean that I don't love them. So the Runtleys are going to come off of the table, and we'll keep moving forwards. The next one is the Ticuna. I like the Ticuna as well, but I don't see this being a top 10 knife. If I'm honest, I quite like it, and I enjoy it. It does end up in pocket every now and then, and it is a fun knife, but it's not a top 10 knife for me. So that's going to go down as well. Here we have the Spyderco Salt 2 Warney. This knife, if you've watched my review of, you know I was actually kind of surprised how much I like this knife. I do need to put a new edge on it. I'll probably be doing that soon on the KME. Maybe I'll record that just because I've beat on it a little bit. But this is a cool, like, waterproof knife, but it's definitely not a top 10 knife, if I'm being honest. Next we have my most gimmicky knife, but one of my most fun knives. This is the Ferrum Forge Micro Fortis, and it is a tiny, tiny little titanium frame lock on bearings with Nitro V steel. It is super fun, but this knife is, at the end of the day, fun. It's not a favorite in the sense of how I typically view my knives. So that's going to get set to the side as well. So that was the few I had on the top, and then there's this row which you can at least see the bottom of. This knife is the Fox Pelican. I really like the Fox Pelican. I was pleasantly surprised by how much I enjoyed using this knife. It doesn't make it in my pocket often for typical daily carry, but it does come with me every now and then when I'm getting out and hiking and stuff. It's a great outdoor folder, and I like it quite a bit. But do I like it top 10? No. Next we have this guy. This is the Boker Lateralis. I actually put a new edge on this pretty recently with my KME. It turned out fairly well for being one of my first few edges. It's quite sharp now. This is a great, what I would consider, budget offering, sub $100. It is a steel frame lock made by Boker. It is a JB Stout design. Like the knife a lot for what it is, but not a top 10 knife. So that's getting set aside as well. Next, this is the Protec Malibu. This knife has become not just one of my favorites of the knives that I've acquired this year or that came out this year, but just one of my favorite knives, period. I really, really like the Malibu. I get immense satisfaction out of the way that the action operates, the way this knife carries, the ergos of it. All of that is fantastic. So this will absolutely, if not be in the top 10, I mean, I can't imagine it won't be. So I'm going to set that over here where my current knives in the running are, and I'm sure I'm going to have to move them as I make more. This is the Protec Godson. I like the Godson a lot. It is a very fun automatic. As you can see, it is super stabby, pointy, really, really fun knife, very well made, very fun action. It's wearing a deep carry clip. I like this knife a lot, but I don't think I top 10 like it. So it's going to get set aside. There's a chance, I guess, maybe that it could get brought back onto the table because I do really like it. But for now, I don't feel like this is a top 10 knife for me. So we're going to set it aside. Now we have the Quiet Carry Waypoint. The Waypoint, much like the Malibu, is a knife that for this year is certainly going to be in my top of the year, but also just in general, it has become one of my favorite knives to carry, to use. I love that I can just get it wet whenever I see water, just for fun, because it's made of Vanex, and it has an LC200N liner, titanium scales, and I think they call it marine grade hardware. It's just a very, very good knife in so many ways, and it'll absolutely be in the running for top 10. Next is the Quiet Carry IQ. This one's relatively new to me, but I quite like the IQ. It makes a great secondary. It's super slim, super small, super light. It's a good cutter, nice slicey little edge on it. It's good blade steel. It's L-Max, and I like this knife quite a bit, but I don't know that it's quite top 10 material for my collection. I like it. I vibe well with it, but yeah, not going to call it top 10 today. Next we have the Giant Mouse Ace Biblio. This knife I like quite a bit. If you've watched my review of this knife, it is very positive. There are a lot of things that I like a lot about this knife, but when I think about it compared to the other knives that I envision making it to the top 10, I don't quite see it there. This one's pretty close, to be honest, but I don't quite see it making it there. So I'm going to set that aside for now as well. This one, however, my other Giant Mouse knife, this is the Giant Mouse Ace Grand. The Ace Grand is absolutely in the running for my top 10 favorite knives. I adore the Ace Grand. I like so much about this knife, from the way it carries, to the way it feels in my hand, to the action, to the cutting performance. There is just so much about this knife that clicks with me, that I feel a connection to. And so, as subjective as it is, as with all of these, that one's definitely in the running. Next one is the Kaiser Feist. This one's a fun little front flipper. I traded for this relatively recently, and I've been enjoying it. I don't know that I'll hold on to this knife forever. I had one of these before, the exact same configuration, and ended up selling it or trading it. I don't remember which at the moment. But I like having this knife. It just doesn't really excite me all that much. It's fun to play with now and then. It's pleasant to carry. There's a lot of good about it, but it's not a top 10 knife. Next, we have the Asher Nomad. This knife is a pretty compelling offering for its price point. Has 35 VN blade steel, G10, ball bearings. It's a fun little knife, but I would be lying if I said it has a chance of being top 10 knife for me. This is a good knife for where it sits price point wise, but it's compared to the knives that are left on the table and that I've already set aside, I don't feel like this is quite in their league or class, but I do like it. Alright, next, let's come over here. This is my ZT-0620. This knife is wearing a custom TerraTough scale made by my buddy Kyle for me, and this is a sentimental knife. This was a gift from my wife, so it has a reason to stick around, but if I'm being honest, it's not a top 10 knife. It just isn't. Let's set it aside. Next we have my ZT-0308. This knife also sentimentally gift from my wife, so it has that going for it. Of the ZTs I own, this one is probably my favorite to carry and use. I like this knife. It's just a beast. It's an absolute tank, super hefty and overbuilt, and it reminds me of the ZT of times past. So I quite like this knife, but I don't see it getting into my top 10. Next, this is my other ZT, also a gift from my wife back when we were dating. This is from before we were married, and so it has an absolute inherent sentimental attachment to it, and for that reason it's going to stick around forever, but it's not a top 10 knife. I don't love that it's spring assisted. I'm not a big fan of speed safe at all, but I have a lot of good memories with this knife, and I still like the knife. There are just things that prohibit it from being my current tastes. So there's that. Next, absolutely going to be in my top 10, no surprise to anybody, is my current favorite knife that I own. I say that a lot. I guess we'll see if there's a knife as I go through this that I'll feel like I put before it in the top 10. But the Koenig Arius was my grail when I started collecting. I got one and I loved it. I ended up letting that one go because the money was green and I wanted it for other things. And then I rebought this one. This one's a Gen 4. Very plain Jane, but it does have lightning pockets and satin flats. And I love carrying this knife. I love using this knife. I love playing with this knife. I love just about everything about the Koenig Arius. So Koenig Arius is absolutely going to be a top 10 contender. I'll set that over there for now. This one, I just finally did my full review of this a couple of days ago. This is my Benchmade Sentinel. It was handed down to me from my dad, and therefore it is absolutely one of those knives that is around for sentimental reasons. Good knife, absolutely, but my current tastes and preferences, this does not quite align with. So other than for the sentimental reasons, I don't have much of a reason to feel attached to it and keep it around. But those reasons do exist, so I feel attached to it and I keep it around. So this one is not going anywhere, but it's not going in the top 10. Next we have my Benchmade Bailout. I have a bug out as well. I own one, but it's loaned out to my buddy right now who's just kind of test driving it, and to be honest, I don't think the bug out would make it into the top 10 at the moment anyways. It probably would have about a year ago, but I've gotten a lot of new things and stuff that I just kind of have made me less attached to the bug out, whereas I thought it was kind of the answer to a lot of problems before. I have other options now. So the Bailout is basically the big brother to a bug out. This one is in CPM 3V blade steel. This is kind of the base version. They also do one with aluminum scales in M4. This one has their plastic scales, 3V blade steel. It's reground to a drop point from my buddies over at River's Edge Cutlery. They make that stupid easy. It's wearing a rock scale design backspacer because the factory backspacer, in my opinion, is an abomination. And those are the alterations I've made to this knife, but I like this knife a lot. I enjoy it. I like carrying it. Super slim, super light. It does all those things very, very well, making it very pleasant to have around to carry. But this isn't a top 10 knife, if I'm being honest with myself. Like it a lot, but I don't top 10 love it. Next is the Benchmade Super Freak. Now this is one of my two favorite Benchmades. The next one is coming right after this. I love the Super Freak. I love so much about the way that this knife is done. I like the way that it fits my hand. I like the way it carries. I like the capability you get for its size and weight. I like the materials used. There is so much good happening here. So this is definitely going to be a contender. I'm not positive this will be one that makes the cut, but it's one that needs to get set aside. Just like this one. This is the Mini Freak, but it's what many call the Super Mini Freak because this is the special newer version of it in carbon fiber scales and S90V blade steel. So it's nice and lightweight. It is a great blade steel. It looks fantastic in my opinion. It has a fun action. There is a lot about this knife that I am super drawn to, and I keep going back and forth. I think I like this one more than the Super Freak, but I don't know, because then if I think like if I had to get rid of one of them, which would I get rid of? And it's really hard for me to say I'd get rid of the Super Freak. So yeah, this one is definitely in the running. Let's set it aside. Next is the Benchmade Tengu. This one is one I just did a carry challenge with recently. It does not have a clip, so it comes with a little leather slip that I frankly do not like carrying it in at all, because then it's a bummer to get out of your pocket and get ready to use. But it's a flipper on bearings, G10 scales, full liners, 20 CV blade steel. There's a lot of cool happening here, but if you watch my full review, you'll see I don't love this knife. There's some qualms I have with it, so it's not going to be a top 10 piece. Next, we have the Rec PM2. This is the avocado PM2, if you will. I adore this paramilitary 2. It is the one that I have wanted for the longest, ever since they did this colorway and configuration on the Para 3, which I missed out on and still wish I had one. I was excitedly looking forward to them doing the PM2. It just recently got this flat dark earth lynch clip on it, which I am stoked about. I was really glad to finally get one of these for it from my buddy Jake. He was the plug on that. This knife has to be in the running, at least for the top 10. I'm a sucker for the PM2 in general, and this one, appearances wise, is my favorite version that has ever come out, and it's an excellent blade steel. It's got a unique coating. There's just a lot of really good stuff happening here, in my opinion. So this one's in the running. Running out of space over there. So this is my C-Rex Shaman. You can see I've got a little bit of rust around the stop pin. I really got to clean that up. But yeah, the C-Rex started as a Tree Rex Shaman, meaning that it was the Knife Center exclusive wood scale version with Rex 45 blade steel. And I went ahead and did a scale swap with some Fireside Co. Terro Tough scales in Seafoam Green, thus making this the C-Rex. It is also wearing a Lynch PM2 style clip, just omitting one of the screws because it takes two if you use that style of clip. A lot of people wonder if that works. It absolutely does. This knife, I of course haven't. If you've looked at my Instagram feed and watched my reviews of this knife, I absolutely have a connection to this knife. What's going to make it interesting is I feel like it kind of occupies a similar space in my mind as the Giant Mouse Ace Grand. So time will tell as I make this top 10 whether it actually goes, because I don't know if I can justify having both in. We'll see. Next is my other PM2. I own two because I like both of these very, very much, and they both make me happy. This one is the other River's Edge Cutlery exclusive called the Scorpion PM2. It has coyote handle scales, and it has a black DLC-coated CPM 10V blade. I really, really like this blade steel. I like the colorway. I love the way that this knife looks. It's different enough from my Avocado PM2 that I don't feel like I need to just have one. I feel like I can have both. Whether they'll both make it into the top 10, we'll see. I think, if I'm being honest, this knife functionally is probably the better choice, being this blade steel. I would take CPM 10V over CTS 204P for sure. But this is about what's my favorite and what makes me happiest. And the Rec PM2 has a little bit more sizzle to it for me. They feel the same, they function basically the same other than the blade steel difference, and the blade coating is different as well. But I think for the sake of giving myself an extra spot to fill with another knife, I don't want to put two PM2s in my top 10. And if I'm really, really trying to identify which of these makes me more excited about the knife, which one subjectively makes me happier to carry, it's probably this one, even though it's not quite as bonkers of a blade steel. I just think I'm going to have to go with the Avocado. So I'm going to set the Scorpion aside and keep the Avocado here. Next we have my carbon fiber, fluted carbon fiber, S90V Native 5. This knife I did a carry challenge with to see if I could get behind carrying a backlock. I don't like backlocks. Still don't. After the carry challenge with this went really well. The reason why the carry challenge with this knife went really well is because everything about this knife other than the lock type is just fantastic. I love carrying this knife. I love cutting with this knife. I like the ergos of this knife. I love how light it is. There's so much good happening here. It is wearing a Para 3 Lynch clip. Fits on there very well for my preferences, and I love carrying and using this knife. It is just excellent. I don't love that it's a backlock. I wish this was a different lock type. Sincerely, it would make me like the knife more. That's just the reality. I forgive that it's a backlock because I love so much about it, but I don't think it's quite going to be in my personal top 10. Thomas Moore is going to be upset because he often says that this is, if he could only have one knife. I've heard him say that this would be the one he would pick, and I don't think he's necessarily wrong for saying so. But of my top 10 knives, lock type gets pretty important. I like to be able to fidget with the knife. I like a different style than the backlock, personally. So I'm going to set this one aside. Love it, but setting it aside. This is my Para 3. It has undergone quite the transformation. If you've been following my channel since the beginning, my original review of this knife, it was wearing the gray G10 factory scales and the factory hardware, but it did have a deep carry clip on it. In fact, it had this deep carry clip on it. Since that time, it has undergone two scale swaps. So first I put it in some blue denim micarta Rips Garage Tech scales. Liked those a lot, but then I saw these come out. These are Cerberus Knives Worker 3 scales, and I really wanted to try them because they vastly alter the shape and ergos and everything about this knife. They're in a linen micarta, and I still have those RGT scales. I might throw them on another pair of 3 at some point, or I might swap back and forth eventually, but I'm just really enjoying this pair of 3 with these scales. It's also wearing titanium hardware, which has been anodized bronze, including the lanyard tube. And I really like this knife in this setup, and it's Maximet, which is my favorite steel for the pair of 3 and the way that I use the knife. So this knife has to be included in my top 10 in some place, because I have always really liked the pair of 3, just like I've always really liked the PM2. They are go-to knives for me. And not just because, like, some people would include them for their like utilitarian senses of how good they are. I happen to also just really like the design and the ergos of them, and it's something I acquired over time, I guess, because when I first started collecting, I didn't think they were all that exciting, but I dig a good PM2 or pair of 3, and this one being so personalized and made mine has a special connection for me. This next one is very new to me. This is the Spyderco Gale Bradley 2. Part of me is super excited about this knife because it's a brand new knife to me, although I had one before, so I'm not coming in with no experience on it. It's wearing these sharp dress knives, natural micarta scales, and an MXG gear deep carry clip. With this configuration, I am loving carrying and using this knife. It has a fantastic blade in M4, so much good happening here, but accessing the lock bar. Everyone says it, and some people have said I should mod it. I might do that, but right now, that's kind of the factor that's keeping it from being in the top 10, I think. And on top of that, there's just a lot of competition in my collection to be in the top 10. So I don't think this is quite going to make it, but I'm real tempted to put it there. There's a slim chance I'll bring this back onto the table, but I don't think I will. Love the knife. Enjoying it. Full review to come on this, but not going to be in the top 10 today. Next, the Danger Pickle. This knife I have a deep connection to because I named it. I didn't give it its official name. The official name of this knife is the Spyderco Bombshell, but I called it the Spyderco Danger Pickle when it came out, and I started doing my first videos and posts about it, and it caught on. And now most people who I see talk about this knife refer to it as the Danger Pickle, including the designer of the knife over at Birch Tree Blade Works. He made me a special bottle opener that says Danger Pickle Gang, and there's a connection to me with this knife because of the story that I have with it. It makes it a lot of fun. But on top of that, if you've watched my review of this knife, you'll know that as a knife, I just have this affinity for the Bombshell, the Danger Pickle. I love the way this knife feels in my hand. I love how smooth everything is. I love how kind of chunky it is, and how typically I'm not drawn to chunky, like thick knives with 2 C's. It doesn't usually get me excited like this does. Something about this knife just works for me. And every time that I carry this knife, every time I find myself fidgeting with it, every time I'm cutting with it, every time I'm just playing with the action, I just like it a lot. And so this one is absolutely going to be somewhere in my top 10. It's going to stay on the table. Next we have another new to me knife. I keep meaning to do my full review of this, but with all the fires and the smoke, I haven't been able to get outdoors, and I really want to do this one outdoors. So it's coming, don't worry. But this is my Demco AD20. This is a bigger knife than I typically like. If you look at everything else pretty much that I've set aside to be in my top 10 potentially, I mean the Shaman and the Grand are relatively big. I guess the Arius is close-ish to this in size, but this is just tankier than anything else that I really love. But I really love this knife. I love the way that the action works. I love the lock type. I love the materials. I don't adore the way that it carries, but I get a satisfaction every time that I carry this knife, and something about it just clicks for me, just works. So this is absolutely in the running. I've got more than 10 left on the table, so we're going to see how this actually thins out. This one is the Ferrum Forge Stinger. This is the last one before we gotta really narrow this down. The Ferrum Forge Stinger is a knife that has kind of surprised me, as along with a couple others on the table, but this knife is sub $100. The retail price is $90. I've seen them on sale in the $70s, and it's Nitro V blade steel, G10 scales over very well hollowed out, like skeletonized liners, great deep carry clip, nice slicey little blade. This is a knife that I love carrying and using, and the action is fun. There's so much good happening here. So I don't know if this is gonna actually make it into the top 10 now that I'm looking at what else is left on the table, but let's keep it here for a minute because this should be in the running, which is impressive because this is the cheapest knife left on the table for sure. All right, so let's set them all out and kind of see what we're looking at, and then these aren't in order yet, don't worry. Just kind of putting them all here so we can take a look and see. Yeah, this is way more than 10 that's left, isn't it? How many do we have here? There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. So I gotta cut 3 out, and then I'm gonna try to at least loosely rank these. And this is not easy at this point. So there's 3 that have to come out of here, which is not fun because I want all of these to be in here. I think honestly, the 1929, as much as I love this knife, I don't know if it quite tickles me the way that some of these others do. So I'm going to take this one out, and then I'm also going to take out, I feel like I should probably narrow it down to either the Super Freak or the Mini Super Freak. This is one of those things that's hard because I don't, I struggle to make myself rate these. It's tough because the Super Freak does fit my hand a little better. Having this little bit of extra size, it just functionally feels a little better in hand. This fits my hand. The ergos are not bad, but the ergos have to go to the Super Freak. The blade steel, I guess if I gun to my head, I'd probably prefer M4 to S90V, although they're both fantastic. I like the carbon scales much better than the G10 though. That said, this G10 is some of my favorite G10 that there is. Alright, this doesn't necessarily mean which of these I would hang on to, which I would sell if I had to sell one and keep the other, but I think I'm going to keep the Super Freak on the table and take the Mini out, which is not necessarily the way I saw that going. So that leaves us with 11, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So there's 11 knives left on the table. As I'm looking at them, the only one realistically that I can see myself taking out kind of has to be the Stinger, which sucks because I love the Stinger. I really do. And it's impressive that a knife at this price point is the last one to get knocked out of the top 10 running. Like if this is finishing 11th, that's pretty impressive for a knife that can be had for $70-something on sale. That's really good. Yeah, I'm gonna have to take that out so that we can move along and deliberate here. So let's figure this out. Let's see if I can squeeze these enough that I can get them all here. So now my favorite knife on the table, my absolute favorite one, has to still be the Arius. If I'm looking at everything else, I've had all these knives in hand as I've been deliberating between them. I think the Arius has just got to be number 1. And that shouldn't come as a real surprise, but we're going to put the Arius as number 1. Next, this is really tough. This might be surprising to some people because it's kind of surprising to me. But I think my second favorite knife is going to be the Demco. I guess it's not surprising in terms of like pricing, because this is the second most expensive knife on the table. I'm not usually like, if it's more expensive, it's definitely that much better. I've kind of got a video on that. But this knife in particular, I've been carrying this a lot. And I've been carrying it so much more than I thought I was going to carry it. I got this knife expecting to like it, but not frankly expecting to love it, because it's kind of a departure from my typical style and most of the knives that I buy, I feel. I was excited about it, but yeah, it's surprised me, and what's been most surprising to me is how much I've wanted to just have it in pocket over and over and over, and how much I've wanted to play with it when it is in pocket. Yeah, I'm gonna put this as number 2. Number 3, this is a tough one. I think honestly, number 3 is probably gonna be the Malibu. Yeah, I might flip-flop on this later when I'm done recording. We'll see. But I think the Malibu, the way that it works in my hand, the level of fun that I have with it, thanks to the action, the way that it carries, just the overall setup of this knife, I think I'm gonna have to put this at number 3. So we went Arius, Demco, 80/20, Protec, Malibu. Number 4, honestly, it's probably gotta be the Rec PM2. A lot of people probably wouldn't even put a PM2 in their top 10 because they just look at it as like a tool knife. But I have this connection to the PM2 where I just really, really like it. I like the way the factory scales feel. I always put a deep carry clip on one, so that's something I change. But this knife, with this this colorway, this setup, the way that this knife is done, and coming from River's Edge Cutlery, there's an inherent, I love that knife shop. I do almost all of my knife shopping with them, if at all possible, and they've become friends, and I like that this is their knife, and I really, really dig it. So let's put that as number 4. Now number 5, I think number 5 is probably going to need to be the Waypoint, because the Waypoint is a knife that I love carrying either as a primary or as a secondary. That scores points for me. I love the clip, love the way it carries, love how slim it is, and I get a kick out of it being Vanex. There's something so fun to me about being able to just get this knife wet, like dunk it in the ocean and put it in my pocket soaking wet, and nothing bad happens to it. There's something so cool about that and so much fun, and I also just love the way this knife feels in my hand. I love the edge that came on it. I'm still on this factory edge. I've just stropped it once at this point, and it is so sharp, and it's just functionally a very good knife for me, and it makes me happy. So Waypoint right there. Next, this is getting interesting. I think next is probably gonna need to be, let me just make some room here. I think it's gonna be the Grand. The Grand has a sense about it that brings me joy. I love the crown spine. I love the way the jimping is placed. I like that it's Elmax. I love the micarta and the way it's done. I like the backspacer. I like the clip. I like the action a lot for middle finger flicking, which is my favorite way to open a knife. I get a lot of joy out of that knife. So next is going to be that, the Grand. Now, next after that, which of these knives makes me happiest? Probably the Danger Pickle. It's kind of crazy that I'm putting this above my Gucci'd out Para 3, but the Danger Pickle just does something for me. Like I already said, I love the way this knife goes in hand. I enjoy carrying it. I enjoy using it. It puts a smile on my face consistently all the time. So, Danger Pickle. There we go. Next, I think I'm going to do the C-Rex, because the C-Rex, it just really feels like it's my Shaman. And I loved the Shaman already. I had a basic S30V Black G10 version. I loved that knife. And I let it go because I knew I was going to get either a sprint or an exclusive, and I was going to do some stuff to it. And this is the way that I wanted to build this knife. And I'm so pleased with the way that it came out, and I just get a lot of joy out of it. These are some of my favorite aftermarket scales I've ever put on a knife. I like carrying this knife. I like using it. I get a good sense of satisfaction out of this knife. So let's do that next. Now the question is, does a Benchmade Super Freak beat my Para 3? Which one's going to be second to last and which one's going to be last? I think honestly, the Super Freak is going to be last. I think I enjoy the Para 3 just a little bit more. Just a little bit. It's close. I really, really like the Super Freak. The fact that any of these knives made it into my top 10 means I really like them, because there's a lot of knives that I love that just got set down into the case on the floor instead of being in this lineup. But yeah, I think I'm going to have to go my Maximet Para 3 as my number 9 spot, and the Benchmade Super Freak as the number 10 spot. So that'll be my top 10 knives. We have the Koenig Arius, the Demco AD20, the Protec Malibu, the River's Edge Cutlery Exclusive Spyderco Paramilitary 2, Quiet Carry Waypoint, Giant Mouse Ace Grand, Spyderco Bombshell aka Danger Pickle, the C-Rex Shaman, Maximet Para 3, and then we have the Benchmade Super Freak. So, as you can tell, I am a bit of a fan of Spyderco. There are 4 of those on the table. That's probably shows you a little bit of my fanboyism for that brand. But there's a lot on here that's also not Spyderco. And price is an interesting thing in this list as well, because it doesn't necessarily really go from like least expensive to most expensive. I guess kind of, because these two are definitely the most expensive, but everything here is kind of within the same range. Like this is a little under 200, I think. This one just over 200, but then a bunch of stuff I've added to it, which has made it more expensive to me. Here, kind of same thing. I mean, this knife itself a little over 200 bucks, but then all of the equipment that's on it. This one was 280 when I got it new. The Ace Grand was under 200. The Waypoint is about 300 on the button. This PM2 was what, like 160 new at the drop. The Malibu is sub 200. So I think that also shows you kind of where my preferences lie in terms of like how much knife I actually get for my money, which is one of those videos I did recently of how much you need to spend on a knife, in my opinion. And if you look at my top 10, there are quite a few in here who are, if not under 200, then are under 300. Like 8 of the 10. You don't have to spend obscene amounts of money to get. And this one was $425. This is about $600. So, yeah, I guess that's going to be that for now. I've got more knives coming all the time, so this may be worth revisiting at a certain point when I've acquired a few more pieces that I think could potentially dethrone some of these. But this was fun. I'm glad I did it this way. Glad I picked each one up and justified to myself why it did or didn't belong in the top 10. And this is a very personal list. A lot of other people would probably have gone through this same group of knives and picked very different ones. But for me, this is my top 10 in my current collection for folders. So there you have that. Hopefully you guys have enjoyed it in some way. I know I've had fun doing it, and I've been meaning to do this for a while. I was just waiting for a loaner to get back that I had loaned out to somebody else to review. And now that I've done it, there's a couple of these that are going to be going to some of my friends who want to check them out or review them as well. So yeah, I'll miss some of these top 10 as they leave, but they are not knives that are on the chopping block to sell at the moment. These will still be my knives. I'll just be potentially loaning them to some people. So there you have it. Thanks, guys. I appreciate you watching, and I'll see you on the next one.